The room was already thick with anticipation before I spoke. 23 executives, some cross-armed, some hiding behind their tablets, waited for me to say something that could justify the last 6 months of my life. I stood in front of the projection screen, pointer in hand. As the slide clicked over to Phase 4 of the infrastructure overhaul, this integration layer will reduce latency by 42% across legacy systems without needing a full rip and replace. It's backwards compatible, scalable, and field tested in 3 client sandboxes. A few heads nodded, one even scribbled a note. Then Dalton Reeves shifted in his seat. "Legacy systems," he said, with a smirk that spread before he even finished. "See, that's the problem. That phrase alone tells me this isn't where we need to go." I paused, blinking once. Our enterprise clients rely on legacy stability. We can innovate without abandoning their frameworks. Dalton chuckled. "Chloe, what you're proposing is evolutionary. What this company needs, what the market demands, is revolution." He stood and began pacing behind me. "This reads like something out of 2015. It's cautious, safe. We're not here to maintain comfort zones. We're here to lead." His voice grew louder with each sentence, and I felt all eyes shift off the slides and onto me. "Frankly," he said, now standing between me and the screen, "you've been here a long time. 10 years is a long time to run the same playbook. Maybe you've lost touch with where this industry's headed." I stood still, one hand at my side, the other gripping the clicker so tightly it left an imprint on my palm. "Maybe," he said with a shrug. "You should take a long vacation, clear your head, come back when you're ready to build the future instead of defending the past." Silence stretched so long I could hear the HVAC humming. I scanned the room. No one met my eye. Not even Thomas. Not even Noor. I closed my laptop, calmly, and said, "Thanks for the feedback, Dalton." He didn't expect that, and he definitely didn't expect the smile I gave him as I walked out. That night, the video arrived, the full recording of the meeting, shaky and poorly framed, but clear enough. No name. Just a message. "He's not just targeting you. He's gutting us. Use this." I hit play again, slower this time, and leaned back in my chair. I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be angry in a clean way, anger that sharpens, not corrodes. Watching that video did something I hadn't expected. It didn't break me. It reminded me. 10 years ago. StrataView was still on the 6th floor of a crumbling warehouse building, with server racks that wheezed louder than the HVAC and an espresso machine that required a mallet. Michael Vance, one of the co-founders, had hired me in a 10-minute conversation that ended with, "I need someone who builds quietly but fiercely. You look like someone who knows how to dig in." He wasn't wrong. Over the next decade, I built StrataView's back-end architecture from duct-tape startup to enterprise-grade backbone. Every API handshake, every redundant failover system, every dashboard that executives loved, pretending they understood it all, came through my hands. When the 2017 data breach almost cost us 3 federal contracts, it was my emergency rerouting system that kept us operational. When the platform lagged under post-pandemic traffic spikes, it was my server clusters that carried the load. I never asked for spotlights, but I had earned a seat at the strategy table. Until Dalton. He arrived with his polished grin and buzzword grenades, hyper-growth, disruption, minimum lovable product, the board. Hungry for a spike in valuation, gave him the keys without asking who he'd run over. Within 6 months, I was out of the weekly syncs, then the quarterly reviews. Then my team was broken up, Noor to product, Tomas to infrastructure, Jalen reassigned to accelerate innovation. By the time I was moved, 2 floors down. The writing wasn't just on the wall, it was blinking in neon. But that video rewound something inside me. I wasn't obsolete. I was dangerous. and someone else in that room knew it too. I plugged in my encrypted drive, opened a folder labeled Vervain OS, and clicked into the prototype. The real work hadn't stopped. It had simply moved underground. Vervain OS wasn't just a prototype. It was a system built from late nights, long weekends, and the parts of me StrataView hadn't already stripped away. I started coding it 7 months ago. The week Dalton announced his Innovation Fridays, the same week I realized the company I'd helped build no longer existed. I remember sitting at a coffee shop on Wells Street, sketching the first architecture diagram on a napkin while a pop song thumped overhead and my phone buzzed with another pointless Slack notification. The rules were simple: personal laptop, personal time, no overlap with StrataView hardware, IP, or infrastructure. I bought my own licenses. I documented everything. I kept receipts for every cup of coffee I drank while working. My lawyer friend, Leona, insisted on that last part. Make a paper trail even your enemies can't erase. I named it Vervainos because vervain is a plant that survives drought, frost, neglect, then blooms anyway. The platform wasn't just an upgrade to what StrataView offered, it was cleaner, leaner, smarter. It adjusted based on user behavior in real time. Its predictive models didn't just show what might happen, they adapted to how teams actually worked. It could migrate legacy systems in hours instead of weeks. It reduced server costs by up to 40%, and it never needed a motivational all-hands meeting to justify its existence. A month ago, I filed a provisional patent. I used my LLC Richardson modular systems set up quietly in Delaware. Leona reviewed everything. The language was airtight. Vervain OS wasn't just mine emotionally. It was mine legally. I'd never intended to use it. Not really. I built it to remind myself I could still create, that I still had worth outside of Dalton's agenda. But now, with that video in my inbox and the structure of StrataView crumbling from the inside, I was starting to see things differently. Maybe Vervain OS wasn't just my escape hatch. Maybe it was the alternative the market had been waiting for. I clicked into the deployment manager and began running new tests, this time not for peace of mind, but for scale. By Monday morning, my name was no longer on the calendar invite for the executive roadmap session. That didn't surprise me. What did was the email that followed an hour later. Effective immediately, Blair Lennox will assume oversight of the platform modernization initiative. Please direct all questions to Blair going forward. Blair, the man who once asked me if APIs came pre-installed, who said user experience was mostly aesthetics, who wore loafers with no socks and called it leadership. I stared at the email, read it twice, then forwarded it to my personal archive subject line, Evidence Number 17. Later that afternoon, I returned from lunch to find a cardboard box sitting on my desk. Not a pink slip. Worse, a relocation notice. Sandra from HR appeared 20 minutes later, armed with a tight smile and a manila folder. "We're streamlining team structures," she began, reading from some internal script. "We'd like to offer you 2 options: a more focused role on system documentation support, or a paid sabbatical to reflect and recenter before re-engaging with our evolving roadmap. Translation: take the demotion or leave quietly." She waited, pen poised. I signed nothing. Instead, I moved the box myself. They hadn't even assigned me a real office, just a folding desk beside IT's backup router closet on the 3rd floor, where fluorescent lights flickered like a threat. I unpacked slowly, 1 plant, 1 photo, 1 brass compass Michael Vance gave me after our first big contract win, engraved simply "True North," across the hall. Blair strolled past holding an iced latte, chatting loudly with someone from marketing about revolutionizing architecture through brand synergy. I pulled out my laptop, connected to my personal hotspot, and opened Vervain OS. Then I opened my LLC's ledger, and then my calendar. This wasn't punishment. This was the quietest runway they could have given me. Noor found me the next morning while I was pretending to care about cable routing diagrams. She lingered by the threshold of my glorified broom closet, her badge swinging slightly, eyes darting left and right like she was checking for ghosts. "I heard about the reassignment," she said quietly. I didn't look up. "Which one?" She winced. "Blair's been asking around. He's trying to get access to your sandbox directories." That got my attention. I turned slowly, met her gaze. "How does he even know those exist?" She hesitated. I let the silence grow uncomfortable. I didn't tell him anything specific. She said quickly, "But he asked if you documented your framework logic anywhere. Said it was for continuity." "Continuity," I echoed, my voice flat. "He doesn't know the difference between logic trees and coffee trees." Noor gave a small, guilty laugh, then dropped her voice even lower. He asked, "I had to trace your internal commits." "I don't know if they did, but..." "Chloe, you should be careful." I nodded slowly. "Thanks." But the chill didn't leave my spine. Noor was my closest ally. She'd stayed late with me through dozens of all-nighters. She once cried in the bathroom with me after Dalton publicly shredded my design brief. But now she was warning me just a little too late. So I tested her, that evening. I uploaded a decoy file into a shared development folder, a mock-up of a theoretical architecture titled Legacy Optimization Flow, third draft. The document was nonsense vague ideas dressed up in real-sounding acronyms, empty diagrams, and misused terminology Blair might not even recognize as gibberish. By noon the next day, Blair quoted it verbatim in a meeting with the strategy team. Noor hadn't just warned me. She'd walked the file straight to him. I closed my laptop and stared at the blinking cursor for a long time. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I was just done pretending that loyalty meant the same thing to everyone. So I opened a new window and drafted a message to someone who'd once offered me something better. Lisette arrived exactly on time, slid into the corner booth like she already owned the place, and didn't waste a second on pleasantries. "You said you had something that could gut Strataview's grip on North Elm," she said, folding her hands neatly on the table. That's a bold promise. I opened my laptop, loaded the Vervain OS interface, and turned the screen toward her. It only took 5 minutes for her to stop pretending to be unimpressed. "This is real-time migration," she asked, tapping through the dashboard. "It's pulling architecture schema from a legacy data set and structuring it for cloud native without pre-configuration. Fully automated," I said. "No third-party plugins, no downtime." She leaned back, watching the AI-driven predictive tool run a simulation, and the analytics module adapts to role-based permissions automatically based on actual behavioral data, not pre-assigned flags. I replied, "And yes, it works with gloves on. I tested it in a refrigerated warehouse." She chuckled, then narrowed her eyes. "Who owns this I do?" I said. "Filed under Richardson Modular Systems, Delaware-based LLC. No Strataview IP, no cross-contamination, all logged, all clean, and I've already filed a provisional patent." Lisette nodded slowly. "So, what do you want exclusive licensing partnership with Omnisource?" I said. "I retain IP ownership through my LLC. You deploy. I want full autonomy over rollout, senior VP title, and performance-based equity." She blinked, calculating. "That's aggressive." I didn't flinch. "It's all so fair." She studied me for a moment, then tapped the table twice. "One condition, you scale fast. North Elm is furious if we move. We move now. One more clause," I added, sliding over a second sheet of paper. "I bring 4 people with me. They're the backbone. No questions, no approvals. Their offers are part of my contract." Lisette read it, smiled like she appreciated the nerve, then nodded once. "We'll draw it up." By the time I closed my laptop, I wasn't just walking away from StrataView. I was preparing to take the only part of it still worth saving. We met at a tucked-away bistro in Lincoln Park, the kind of place where the lights were dim enough for secrets and the waitstaff knew better than to hover. I'd reserved the back table. Furthest from the windows, no one spoke right away, just nods, tight smiles, eyes scanning for exits. Jalen arrived first, back-end lead turned internal ghost, then Kira, whose UX instincts were wasted these days on pitch decks Blair had no business approving. Thomas came last, still smelling faintly of solder and server rooms. Noor hesitated at the door but sat beside me without a word. We didn't order wine. We didn't toast. I simply opened with what mattered. I'm leaving StrataView. You all know it. What you don't know is I've already signed with OmniSource. No one looked surprised. Thomas leaned back in his chair. You built something, didn't you? I nodded. It's called Vervain OS. It works. It's clean. It's ours. If you want it, Kira whispered. You already filed a patent, didn't you? Filed, protected, and live. They were quiet again. But this time, it felt like the kind that comes before agreement, not dissent. Then Noor cleared her throat. I have to tell you something. Her voice was hoarse. Dalton told me to watch you, dig into your folders. I didn't want to, but he threatened to put me on the layoff list if I didn't cooperate. My jaw tensed, but I waited. I forwarded him a document I thought was real. You planted it, didn't you? I nodded once. Her eyes brimmed, but she pulled out her phone, opened a secure folder, and slid it across the table. Here's the full HR restructuring plan. They're cutting 40% of staff and consolidating architecture under Blair's team. It's scheduled to go live next quarter. I took it without a word. Not because I forgave her, but because I still needed her. After dessert, I handed each of them an encrypted USB drive. No labels, no instructions, just a look that said, prepare. By the time we stepped out into the cool night air, we weren't just co-workers anymore. We were the escape team. The Slack thread lit up at 10:17 a.m., first with emojis, then with silence. The kind of silence that pulses beneath disaster. I didn't need to ask. I already knew what was happening. Northelm's long-awaited strategy session was today. Blair was set to present StrataView's so-called next-gen predictive framework, a butchered shadow of what Vervain OS was meant to be, by noon. An anonymous internal clip made its way to me. Screen recording, no audio. But the visuals told the story well enough. The UI froze 3 minutes in. The AI module spat out numbers that made no sense, forecasting inventory spikes in categories Northelm had discontinued years ago. The predictive dashboard redirected shipments to a facility that had been demolished in 2019. And there he was, Blair fumbling through the interface, smile evaporating in real time while Dalton stood behind him. Arms crossed, jaw flexing. When the feed cut off, I just sat there, the corner of my mouth twitching. Not out of malice, out of inevitability. You can't steal the blueprint and expect to build the cathedral, especially when you never understood what the blueprint was for. I spent the rest of the day answering no calls, ignoring every message from StrataView's internal chat, letting the fire burn through the building they'd tried to trap me in. At 12:03 a.m., my phone vibrated. A text from a number I recognized but hadn't saved. Are you available to speak privately? James Lang, Northelm CEO. I replied with 2 words. Name the time. He didn't hesitate. Tomorrow, 4 p.m. Your terms. I put my phone down, opened Vervain OS, and ran one final stress test on the migration engine. Every function passed. By the time I closed the lid, the decision wasn't whether to step in, it was whether to let StrataView bleed a little longer before I did. James Lang met me in the glass-walled boardroom at Northelm's River North headquarters. No preamble, no handshakes, Just a nod toward the screen. Show us. I plugged in my drive, launched the Vervain OS demo environment, and mirrored it to the massive display. 10 seconds in, I bypassed slides and walked them straight into a live simulation using Northelm's own anonymized data public supply trends, historical order patterns, warehousing shifts over 5 years. The interface adjusted automatically based on user input. The demand forecast recalibrated in real time with inventory movement. A single click pulled up a predictive shipping route optimizer that shaved $3.2 million off their Q2 logistics budget. Using logic their current system couldn't even replicate without an analyst team and a week of scripting. I didn't speak for 10 minutes. I let the product do what Dalton never could. By the time I finished, half the board was leaning forward. The other half was on their phones, one of them Harlan. CFO cleared his throat. What would it take to deploy this by next quarter 72 hours for migration? I said, no downtime. Exclusive license through my LLC, full support from Omnisource, and no ties to StrataView. James nodded once. We want it. Someone across the table spoke without lifting their eyes from the screen. How do you want to handle the transition I don't? I said. You do. They issued a formal termination notice to StrataView within the hour, immediate suspension of all future contracts, legal cited breach of performance standards, and failure to meet predictive integrity benchmarks. I didn't need to see it happen. I knew Dalton would read that email in his corner office with the skyline behind him and feel it collapse. Back at my apartment, I opened Vervain OS and connected the license key to Northelm's back-end system. As the migration tool fired up, clean lines of code slid across the screen like ink on fresh paper. $40 million of infrastructure now ran through the platform they tried to bury. I made a silent note of the date, saved the system log, and prepared a second offer, this one, for my team, by Thursday. StrataView stock had dropped 23%. The press called it an unexpected rupture in enterprise continuity. Internally, they called it something else, a bloodbath. Dalton never saw the letter coming. Northelm was their crown jewel, their credibility anchor. Without it, they weren't a market leader. They were just expensive overhead with flashy branding. By Friday morning, the board issued a statement Dalton Reeve had stepped down to pursue other opportunities. I didn't need to read between the lines. I already knew who wrote them. Legal tried to bite back. I got a cease and desist letter alleging misappropriation of trade secrets, unauthorized migration, brand interference. I replied with a 12-page packet LLC records, timestamps, Git commit logs, patent filings, all documented meticulously across 7 months. Leona sent it herself, with a final line I'll never forget. If you wish to proceed with litigation, please include a copy of the IP policy Dalton never read. The letter vanished. So did the threat. Noor, Thomas, Kira, and Jalen joined me officially by Monday. They didn't resign in fury. They handed in calm, courteous letters, all effective immediately, all unbothered. Their inboxes were deactivated within an hour, that afternoon. I moved into my new office at Omnisource top floor, corner window, overlooking the river. No plaque on the door yet, just a clean desk, a quiet view, and a platform humming beneath it, all that now powered the supply chain of 3 national firms. I was unpacking my laptop when the final email came in. From Michael Vance, subject, The Long Game Chloe. I followed every move and every silence. You just brought the company back to what it was supposed to be only now. It's finally in the right hands. Thank you. M. I reached into the box beside me and pulled out the brass compass he'd given me 10 years ago. I placed it on my desk, dead center. Then I sat back, opened my calendar, and blocked off the next 2 hours. Not for rest, for strategy.